was convened for the first time in May 1954 by Polish socialist Joseph Ratzinger, a major voice behind the European Union. Also instrumental in its creation was Prince Bernhard of the House of Orange in the Netherlands, former German SS officer and spy via chemical company IG Farben, and who later became chairman of Shell Oil. It was to be a group of leading politicians and their advisors, executives from media, banking and multinational corporations, educationalists and military leaders who would meet to discuss the global future by addressing matters of critical importance in an off-the-record manner so that the distractions of politics could be kept out of the way. The group has since met annually in strict secrecy, and despite the considerable high-level media representation in the group, the meetings are never reported. Leading the group is an unelected steering committee, the chairman of which since 1991 has been Lord Carrington. Members outside this committee probably do not know the agenda towards which the group is working and are merely invited to be sold the public face of the New World Order for them to expound its virtues in their areas of influence. The Trilateral Commission, TC, also known as the Child of Bilderberg, this group was founded by David Rockefeller in 1972-73 to covertly unify the policies of the U.S., Europe and Japan. Jimmy Carter's presidency was their first major coup, with the president and many members of his administration being trilateralists, including Zbigniew Brzezinski, his national security advisor and the first director of the Trilateral Commission. House of Rothschild, Rockefeller Empire, Dr. Henry Kissinger. Part 2. The main protagonists. House of Rothschild. The Rothschild Empire was founded by Meyer Amschel Bauer, born 1743 in Frankfurt, with money embezzled from a German prince, William IX, who had in turn stolen the money from soldiers he was supplying to the British in the American War of Independence. Nathan, the son of Bauer, now Rothschild, set up the London branch and established the banking interest N.M. Rothschild and Sons, which also had branches in Paris, Vienna, Berlin and Naples. Control passed through Nathan's son Lionel to Nathan Meyer Rothschild, who became governor of the Bank of England, was awarded a peerage in 1885 and was a member of the Round Table. At this time, 1886-87, Randolph Churchill, Winston's father, was Chancellor of the Exchequer, funded by the Rothschilds and a close friend of Nathaniel Rothschild. Other notable family members include Lord Victor Rothschild, the alleged fifth man in the KGB spy ring, who was in charge of the Regulation 18B prosecutions under Winston Churchill, whereby a person could be arrested and imprisoned merely on suspicion. He was head of Edward Heath's policy unit, 1970-74, and allegedly head of an unnamed subversive organization designed to manipulate the introduction of a federal Europe. He was also once a governor of the BBC. Baron Edmund de Rothschild was instrumental in the debt for equity schemes whereby third world countries gave up environmentally sensitive land as a payment for debts. Evelyn de Rothschild is the current chairman of N.M. Rothschild and is a member of the board of the Daily Telegraph, owned by the Hollinger Group. Associated companies, families. Since the late 1800s, business interests in America have been largely represented by Kuhn, Lobo and Co. and controlling interests are often concealed by companies with City or First City in their names, for example First City Financial Corporation of Vancouver, First City Development Limited. The operation is largely coordinated through Rothschild Incorporated, New York, and Power Corp., a Canadian company with strong links to the Hollinger Group. The Rothschilds are allegedly behind the Morgan Empire, which derives from the London-based George Peabody and Co., which became J.S. Morgan and Co. in 1864 on the death of Peabody, a Rothschild agent. Control passed to J.S. Morgan's son, John Pierpont Morgan, and the company acquired its present name off J.P. Morgan. The Morgan empire now includes General Electric and all its subsidiaries, Morgan Guaranty Trust, National Bank of Commerce. etc. The House of Rothschild also has strong connections with the Warburg banking family, which includes Paul and Felix, who were instrumental in the setting up of the U.S. Federal Reserve System, and their brother Max, who ran the German interests. Rockefeller Empire. The Rockefeller Empire is based on oil, largely the Standard Oil Company set up by John D. Rockefeller in 1853. Part of this is now more familiar as Exxon and Esso. Its influence on the political arena has been fairly open and obvious. J.D. Rockefeller III set up the Population Council in 1952, which, ever since, has been advocating zero population growth in the U.S. In 1972 this sentiment was echoed by Lawrence Rockefeller, CFR, Bill, T.C., who was appointed by Nixon to lead a commission into population growth. When Ford became president as a result of Nixon's resignation in the aftermath of Watergate, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller became vice president, 1974–77. A member of the CFR, he had formerly been part of the U.S. delegation at the creation of the UN. A key family member is David Rockefeller, who is head of the Chase Manhattan Bank, was chairman of the CFR, 1946–53, is an omnipresent Bilderberger and creator of the Trilateral Commission. Percy Rockefeller is on the board of the Morgan Guaranty Trust and a member of the Skull and Bones Society. The Rockefellers donated money for the construction of the League of Nations headquarters in Geneva and donated the land in New York on which the UN headquarters are built. Associated companies, families. The companies in which the Rockefellers have a controlling interest include Chase Manhattan Bank, Standard Oil, Esso/Exxon, National City Bank, Hanover National Bank, United States Trust Company, Equitable Life and Mutual of New York. Cousins of the Rockefellers are the Dulles brothers, who were appointed to the U.S. State Department during World War I, participated in the Treaty of Versailles meetings, became part of the RIA, CFR network and had connections throughout U.S., English and German banking. John Foster Dulles, very much in favor of a super race and a prominent supporter of Hitler, became Secretary of State at the same time as his brother. Allen was head of the CIA. Dr. Henry Kissinger, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, leading Bilderberger and head of Kissinger Associates, with Lord Carrington. Henry Kissinger is also connected with the RIA, the Chase Manhattan Bank, the Rockefeller Foundation, and is international advisor to the Hollinger Group. His public offices include being head of the State Department and National Security Council under Nixon, 1969. Kissinger was the leading international diplomat in the events that precipitated the Vietnam conflict and the Yom Kippur War between Egypt, Syria and Israel, and yet was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. He is also a member of the Alpine Freemasons Lodge in Switzerland and is possibly a leading figure in P2. Steps towards a global bank. Part 3. Economic control. Moves towards the New World Order have been aided by the development of the current banking and economic system. As I have said before, it does not take a leap in imagination to realize that, at present, those who own the money in the world, control the world. And this is exactly how the Brotherhood has achieved its extensive influence. During the Middle Ages, when wealth was measured in riches, property and treasure, in gold especially, the Brotherhood, mainly in the guise of the Templars, managed to set themselves up as high-level money lenders and repositories for wealth of the rich. Over time a system was devised whereby IOU tokens were supplied which represented the golden store, instead of moving the cumbersome treasure itself. It was realized that vast sums could be made by the Brotherhood by lending out, in the form of paper, representations of wealth, more than they actually had, and charging interest on this wealth which did not exist. The returns were real wealth and gold as interest on worthless paper. Eventually, the world's gold reserves fell into the hands of the Brotherhood, who initiated a now world-recognized system of paper bartering, which merely represented the wealth which lay in the vaults of these mega-wealthy few. Thus was created the system which rules the world today, known now as a respectable business. It is the system called banking. Since Babylonian times, usury, the lending of wealth at interest, has been one of the main causes of war and empire building. Nations such as Persia and Rome became great due to their massive debts incurred by lending money from wealthy nations. Later, unable to return the wealth, but rich and with great armies funded by this borrowed wealth, they soon realized the need to conquer these lending nations in order to nullify their debts. This was also the reason for the introduction of taxes, a global system which is in use right up to today. The charging of interest inflates the prices of goods, as a large percentage of an item's cost is spent in servicing the debts of the suppliers/manufacturers, distributors, etc. The greater the debt, the higher the price. Banks use this high rate of inflation to justify raising interest rates in order to discourage borrowing. This serves to create more debt on the existing loans and further reduce the amount of money in circulation. Economic depressions and booms are simply created by the banking institutions at will, by controlling the amount of money and credit in circulation. Banks extend their influence to every aspect of life by manipulating the stock markets to gain controlling interests in multinational companies. For example, a company seeking expansion is refused a loan by a bank. The value of the shares fall. The bank buys them before changing its mind and granting the loan. In order for a nation to prosper on a global economic basis, it must borrow from private money lenders, other people's money and money which does not exist in real terms, to pay for the implementation of its policies, and then take real wealth back out of the nation's hands, plus interest, in order to pay back the debt. At the same time, people are borrowing from the same banks to pay their taxes, their mortgages, other money lent at interest, and to maintain the lifestyle they feel they deserve. This means that the banks can never lose. All wealth in circulation around the world, in effect, either belongs to them, is owed to them, or will eventually be dragged into their vaults by the banking system. In 1993, the UK paid £24.5 billion in interest, more than twice that in the education budget. And yet, there was nothing to stop governments from printing their own money and lending it interest-free. Abraham Lincoln did so, just before he was murdered by John Wilkes Booth, allegedly a Rothschild agent, and J.F. Kennedy had proposed to revive government-printed money just before he too was removed in the same way. The elite-controlled banking system is partly coordinated through the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland and handled in individual countries by the national central banks, which are either private banks, for example U.S. Federal Reserve, or privately controlled banks under a facade of nationalization. In England, the National Bank was established in 1694 by the new King William of Orange, maneuvered into place by the Orange Order, which is directly controlled by the black nobility. It was a private venture under the House of Rothschild, which has maintained its influence since nationalization. The U.S. Federal Reserve System was manipulated into place by the elite bankers in 1910 through the efforts of Paul and Felix Warburg and Colonel House. The imposition of a federal income tax required an amendment to the 16th Constitution and therefore needed the agreement of 36 states. It was never actually ratified, as only 2 states